February was just about 13 million nights, which, if you have been keeping track, this is the lowest level in the past year.
Do you want to talk about some of the crazy stuff that happened? The countdown has started. Jamie Lane, we are going to challenge ourselves to make this the most snackable episode ever for people today. How does that sound?
The short-term rental industry, the economy, spring break, and everything in between, all within 30 minutes. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about, baby. Listen, people are busy, and also people have spring break vacations to get to. We gotta make this easy for them. This needs to be like a commute distance, I mean, like a nice little package for you, our lovely audience. Oh, it's been a minute since we've been together, so I'm just happy that we're recording the two of us.
Yeah, it's been a little while. We've had some great guests on the podcast recently. We've both been to some conferences recently, talking with clients, getting out and about. And it's been maybe a little bit of a wild couple months in the industry and the economy.
100%. It's, I think, like we were talking about acceleration, like it's just go, go, go. That's the theme. Things have accelerated. Things have escalated. I don't know. Huh? Wasn't anything in the news last week. I mean, like nothing interesting to read about.
The other thing I wanted to start doing at the beginning of the episodes, I probably should have mentioned it, is introducing ourselves again for all our new listeners. For those of you who don't know, I am Jamie Lane, VP of Research at Airbnb.
Oh, I love this. And yes, I mean, audience, we don't prepare. This is just a very authentic podcast. I am Mariah. I am Jamie Lane's faithful sidekick. But in addition to that, and mostly here for the laughs, I am also the VP of marketing. I do have a serious day job, but this is my fun time. So yeah, I don't want to talk about that. Cool.
But I do want to talk about what's going on in the industry. So,
we're on the clock. All right. So let's talk about it. You mentioned it. You're like, what is it? What is demand looking like? What does the future hold for us, Jamie Lane? Help.
So for those of you that have been following along, we talk about sort of nights stayed.
Yep.
February was just about 13 million nights, which, if you have been keeping track, this is the lowest level in the past year. But not to worry. February is typically the weakest month for demand during the year. I don't know about you, but it is a little chilly here today in Atlanta. And we have seen some wild weather around the country that has been sort of messing with demand patterns. Record snow in certain parts of the West. I've seen photos of just ski areas getting dumped in, people getting sort of buried in their homes.
Right.
And obviously, on some ways, that's great for skiers. In other ways, it's terrible for people actually trying to get to those rentals to actually go on their trips. And some very weak snow out east, and impacting different areas there. Maybe some cooler than expected weather in certain beach markets. So some ups and downs, but overall demand was still up year over year, up 18% in February. So we're still sort of riding the wave of highs off of all the supply that's come on to the industry over the past year. We've also continued the almost year-long decline in occupancy. So occupancy was down further, 1.8% in February. That is a theme that we expect to continue. new listings continuing to sort of surprise to the upside. Available listings up 26%
No.
year over year,
Wow.
which was a bit of an acceleration from January. Um, and man, it kills me to see that. I'm great that people are continuing to invest
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in our market. Um, that we see new listings continue to come online. Um, when we look back to last year, March, April, May was when we really saw the surge that sort of led to and all the supply growth that we reported throughout 2022.
Very.
So it's going to be really interesting as we sort of head into those months. Uh, do we sort of meet those levels? Do we exceed them? Do we start to come down? My expectation has, and I think will continue to be that it starts to come down. But every single month, I keep getting surprised to the upside
Yeah.
in terms of supply growth. Um, we're going to be releasing some updated forecasts. I'll probably talk about them on the podcast next month, but we'll be upping our forecast for 2022 or 2023 for supply growth. We were at 9%. I suspect we're north of 12% for the year when those updated numbers come out. So it's yeah, it's and that just makes it that much harder when we look at and how much demand our industry
Right.
continue to
Absorb.
absorb
Yeah.
and how big those occupancy declines might be. So far, the past few months, we've been averaging out around that 2% mark.
Right. The
Um,
decline month over month.
yeah, and where during the summer we were down 10%. I
Mhm.
don't expect that we get back to the and see further 10% declines this summer, but I'm definitely further declines as we look out over the next year.
Love it. Well, thank you. That was such a good, succinct update. Couple of key takeaways there for me. Like you said, um, in the last 11th month is the lowest it's ever been for demand. That said, it's a short month, only 28 days. And, people probably are kind of saving it, which we're going to talk about in a minute for some spring travel. But you also mentioned the 1.8%, I think, down for occupancy. And is that February 2022 versus February 2023?
Yep.
Perfect. Love it. Well, Jamie, that's a good update. And I love that we're reserving the right to reforecast. We're like, listen, we'll keep you updated. Things are changing. Do you think some of that supply listing growth that maybe was a little bit more unexpected? I'm just thinking about how long it takes for somebody to get their property online. Like, is it possible that that knock-on effect is just sort of delayed a few months as people that maybe purchased back in December are now finally getting their properties online and up and running?
And there's some of that. I'm definitely. But what I think and the theory I'm working with now on why supply growth continues to sort of move up is just, and if you remember back to 2021 or maybe early 2022, there was just so many homes being bought,
What?
second homes being bought.
Great.
Um, and and maybe you bought that second home with the idea of I definitely want to use it in 2021, 2022 for working remote. And
Yeah.
now with things, I got it at maybe a 2.5, 3% interest rate.
Yep.
Now things maybe going back to more normal and office environment. Um, considering like, hey, and short-term rental revenues are still and very strong, and we I'm sort of and that persistence at the peak, we're still staying and 30, 40% higher than 2019 levels in terms of earning potential.
Okay.
And there's real opportunity out there, and people are maybe bringing those homes that they bought in prior year and now deciding to list them, which there's 6 million second homes out there.
Easy.
and only 1.5 million I'm listed on Airbnb and VRBO in the US. So there's a huge shadow supply of available homes that could be listed on any given day, irregardless of what's happening in the investment market of people sort of buying homes specifically to list on in the short-term rental industry.
All right. I love it. Well, that was a good breakdown. And again, just for folks, that was a 34% persistence at the peak, 34% increase in revenue. Was that what it was, Jamie?
Is it 30, and I think 30-40% higher, 30, somewhere around there, uh and revenue today on a per available listing than back in 2019.
Love it.
And that, and to show too, and I thought you were going to ask this, like with the occupancy declines, like we're still higher than 2019 levels. So that sort of indexing off the highs, we're still, and February is the lowest, and so we're only 2.5% higher than 2019. We didn't get that much higher in 2021, 2022, and February is just not the month where you're going to really accelerate or
Right.
induce a whole lot more people to start traveling, just given the weather around the country.
Yeah. 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 No, that makes sense. And thank you for calling me out on not asking that question. No.
Always the optimist that you are, Mariah.
No, I think, but it's so important for folks, right? Like what's really to contextualize what's declining versus like just slow and steady growth, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, you and I both, again, just because we also probably are dreaming of the beach, want to talk a little bit about the economy and like spring break and all that stuff. I think we agreed to the economy first. Again, guys, we prepare. I swear we prepare for this podcast. Do you want to talk about some of the crazy stuff that happened
Yeah.
last week?
Last week, as we're recording,
Yeah,
over the weekend.
that's true.
But maybe I'll start with just some of the headline economic figures, uh,
Love it.
because, and that's where my head immediately goes. Because I'm, like it or not, the consumer economy, discretionary spending that happens in our industry is, um, and really dependent on people maintaining jobs,
True.
further job growth happening, and people having the wages and discretionary income to spend on travel. So I'm two metrics I'm monitoring most closely. Job growth. Job growth has been amazing over the past 2 months.
Right. Right.
517,000 new jobs in January, 311,000 new jobs in February, um, almost, and maybe too strong. And so, and up until last week, expectations and sort of the market was, and we were going to go from the Fed raising rates of 25 basis points and sort of maybe re-accelerating rate growth up to 50 basis points,
Wow.
given the sort of really strong job numbers, still persistently high inflation. We saw 0.5% month over month in January in CPI, 0.4% month over month in February. And we're still seeing a deceleration in year over year growth overall. We were only at 6% headline inflation in February, which is down significantly from what we were seeing over the summer.
Right.
Um, it's still looking like we could get to 3% by the end of the year. So I think we're still sort of according to script
Yeah.
for what we want to see, but we're sort of wavering in that it's not decelerating maybe at the rate that we had seen in November and December, and worrying the Fed a bit. But then sort of that was all maybe thrown out the window a bit with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank um,
That was
on
the news I was
Thursday.
alluding to, which
Yeah,
more old
Signature
news,
Bank,
but
over the weekend. The sort of Fed and Treasury sort of stepping in, the FDIC taking over those banks. deciding to sort of backstop those deposits, making sure and all those depositors were fully insured and having access to their money. Really, we hadn't seen a bank fail
Yes.
um, in years. And Silicon Valley Bank was the second largest bank failure we had ever seen, second only to Washington Mutual back in 2008. So um, and economists will debate and are debating whether or not it was necessary to prevent sort of further contagion in the regional sort of bank markets. I think it was a great move personally by the Fed and the Treasury to come in and sort of stop further and what could have been a crisis in the banking market, sort of spreading further into the overall economy. And it would have been a really tough spot for the Fed to be in if we had a full on banking crisis all the while,
Right.
inflation still sort of well above where we want it to be, because and the Fed wouldn't necessarily have their tool of lowering interest rates to prop up these banks to promote more economic activity,
Right.
given that they're sort of tightening interest rates and wanting to slow economic activity. So, and the right move, in my opinion, and one we'll look back and be happy that they did.
Lot of levers there, right? Lots of balancing acts. But thank you. I always love when you remind us what those metrics are that we should be paying attention to for demand and everything else with the economy. That was a great synopsis. I should challenge you to do these things more often quickly.
uh, and I know we're going to jump into spring break, but
Yeah.
maybe one of the overall industry metrics that I didn't mention
Good.
that is, and our listeners will know is my favorite,
Hey, guys,
is,
everybody, this is a quiz. Remember what Jamie's favorite is. Me too. Me too.
is nights booked. So how many reservation
Yes.
nights were made during the month of February, comparing back to last February. So I mean, our metric of um, sort of booking activity, and that's for future dates, not stays happening in February. And during February, that was up 14.8%. So maybe a slight deceleration from January, but I'm very much in the bullseye of what we want to be seeing to sort of and keeping up with and the sort of strong level of supply growth.
Right.
Still introducing some declines in occupancy, but and broadly a good number,
It's like, ooh,
and
number.
sort of tease us up for a good spring break, as a lot of those and most of those bookings being made in February are for March and April travel. So people gearing up for spring break, and broadly, it's looking like it's going to be a healthy spring break season for most markets around the country.
Love that. I love that. Where is it healthiest, Jamie Lane? Where are the people going? I need to know where not to go. No, I'm kidding.
So if you want to avoid the
Uh-huh.
crowds,
Uh-huh.
uh, I don't think it's maybe uh, a surprise to say, don't go to Disney during spring break. Uh,
Weird. Weird.
there,
Right.
uh,
Right.
there are a lot of people planning on going to Orlando. It is our top spring break market, sort of the Orlando, Kissimmee area. Number two, Phoenix, Scottsdale,
Oh,
big market for spring training,
yep.
baseball.
I've talked about this before. I have to get Shin to spring training next year. My husband, you heard it here, honey. I'll get you there next year. I promise.
Uh, so that was actually one of our strongest demand growth markets too. Demand in Phoenix up almost 40% for spring break travel year over year.
Crazy.
Um, Gatlinburg coming in at number three, sort of Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge market demand up 17% year over year. And then rounding out the top five, sort of our some of the most popular beach markets, Panama City and Miami down in Florida. Um, Further growth there. Miami, while strong, I'm number five market for spring break. Demand only up 3%. They're a market that's seen a lot of new supply coming in.
Right, right.
We're actually seeing some pretty significant year-over-year declines in occupancy and revenue per listing. So great to see that they're sort of maintaining that demand, but maybe not as much growth that they'd like to see in demand, given how much new supply that's come into that market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, well, good. All places I will avoid for spring break. That's done and done. I need a nice like off the beat place. I mean, I'm probably not the only one, especially if you're looking for a new market to invest in. Like something that's like just up and coming, like a little rising star. Oh.
I think we talked about enough of those sort of rising stars off the beaten path
Yeah,
markets for best places to invest.
that, I
Uh,
promise I wasn't trying to make you do a best places to invest plug.
uh, yeah, and some of the maybe rising star markets for growth. If maybe that's what you're hinting
It
to.
was, it
Uh,
was. See,
I Many of them, like Phoenix, are in some of the larger cities. So, Jersey City, Newark area,
there you go.
fastest growing market for spring break. Not a ton of people going there for spring break, similar to Minneapolis, which was number three. Chicago coming in at number five. Hampton's there, number four. So some decent growth in some of the larger cities as urban travel comes back.
Yeah,
There's some of the cities that it saw some of the strongest ADR growth too. So Boston, DC, seeing over 15% ADR growth for um, spring break. So finally, some of those big cities getting pricing power back and
yeah,
being able to capitalize on both domestic and international travel coming back to these cities.
100%. Yeah, those are some places I'd go to for sure. Maybe not Chicago, only because it's cold until like June there. But anyway, I digress.
Right.
Goodness, we covered so much. Did we miss? What did we miss? I think we over indexed on speed.
And I will say, I maybe talked a bit about my concern about supply
Yeah.
and how we'd seen a reacceleration.
Yep.
Um, Maybe give some caveat to that
Yeah. Okay.
because um, that's something that is playing out differently across the country.
Very good point.
Um,
Very, very good point.
we are seeing a deceleration and further deceleration in supply growth in a lot of the coastal and mountain markets. Those are some of the areas that have been hit hardest in terms of the occupancy declines.
Right.
Seeing and year-over-year declines in revenue per available listing, um, and those are ones we're clearly seeing um, a deceleration in listing growth, which I think is going to be um, um, helpful for people operating those markets.
Definitely.
That we're not seeing further investment into it right now, giving those markets some time to absorb all the supply that's come in. Um, um, we are seeing further acceleration though in some of the urban, suburban, some of the mid-size, and still in the small city, rural areas around the country. So that's where if you're operating in urban, it's broadly getting absorbed though. And this winter, and winter's tough with urban areas because demand's not great. And
Right.
as you said, not really looking to go to Chicago in the
Every
winter.
Chicago, every Chicago.
Yeah, and many of those markets sort of are propped up in the spring,
Yep.
summer, fall, as people are sort of traveling to the cities, visiting friends and relatives. Um, they do see the benefit of sort of the longer term travel. So those stays, 28 days or longer, really big benefit once we get into sort of broadly migration season. Is that what you call it when people start moving? Uh,
Yeah. Well, you mean like the
uh,
snowbirds? Like the people.
no, saying like if I was going to move to Denver, like
Oh,
typically don't do it during the school year, during winter. You do it
right. Summer. Yeah.
and over the summer. Yeah. So as people start to move, short-term rentals are being used more and more for temporary housing, things like that. Um, so that can be a big benefit for the urban areas during spring summer periods.
I love this. This is great. Well, that was some excellent knowledge you just dropped on us. I think it's right. I mean, like, I'm always struck by the nuance of the business and how much just kind of goes back to your strategy, right? So, like, yeah, great to see that there's some relief in some of the more popular destination areas, potentially as folks decide that that might not be the best place for them to start their business. And then in those areas where supply is growing, I think it feels like definitely an opportunity if you are in that market, or even if you're thinking about going in that market, is to get in early with a good competitive advantage. As always, we've talked a lot, and we'll talk more about it, I think, soon. How important those star ratings are, and just doubling down on that guest experience, making sure that you're standing out in the crowd. And then I had a great interview the other day with Kirby Atwell. Um, and he was talking about, I mean, his strategy is completely different from so many's, right? He's just finding markets where there's slow and steady demand. And to your point, it's not just about like, hey, I wanted to go to the beach. It's like, it's a college town where people are visiting, or there's just a couple little draws, or he's getting people that are moving in the mix. So, just a reminder to folks, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do this that fits with what sort of you are expecting to get out of it in terms of strategy and approach. And let's talk more about that next time, Jamie, because again, the mandate for this episode was short and snackable, an alliteration. You know how I like those.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Mariah,
And
as always.
yes, it's so great to catch up with you as always. And I'm sure I'll see you on the road again soon.